Welcome to our deep dive on dealing with adversity.
Oh, yeah.
Today we'll be unpacking Christopher Hamilton's book, How to Deal with Adversity.
Oh, okay.
It's a really fascinating look at facing life's inevitable challenges.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to dive into it with you today.
Yeah, me too.
So it's not your typical self-help guide.
Right.
We'll be drawing wisdom from all kinds of sources.
Yeah, history, literature, science even.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
To better understand how to navigate those rough patches we all encounter.
Yeah, so what's really interesting about Hamilton's approach is that he doesn't try to sugarcoat things or offer easy solutions.
Right.
He really delves into the philosophical underpinnings of adversity,
Yeah.
helping us see it not just as something to avoid,
I love that.
but as a potential source of growth and understanding.
Yeah, he starts off by saying that adversity is actually built into the human experience.
Yeah.
It's not just bad luck or something we can simply avoid.
Mm-hmm.
He uses the example of our basic physical vulnerability.
Right.
We can get sick, we get injured,
Yeah.
and eventually we all face death.
Yeah, that's true.
But it goes even deeper than that.
Absolutely.
All right.
So Hamilton argues that our desires and needs, things like our longing for connection or recognition or even just material things,
Yeah.
are often in conflict with the limited resources available.
Yeah.
And this inherent scarcity creates competition and inevitably leads to some degree of adversity for everyone involved.
So it's not just about external factors,
Uh-huh.
like a sudden illness or a financial setback,
Right.
but also about our own internal struggles
Yeah,
and how we relate to the world around us.
exactly.
That's really interesting.
He actually borrows this idea from Samuel Johnson,
Okay.
who called this insatiable desire the hunger of the imagination.
The hunger of the imagination.
Yeah, it's like our minds are always reaching for something more.
Right.
Even when we achieve our goals,
Mm-hmm.
there's always that next thing we crave.
It never ends.
Right? Like we're never satisfied.
Exactly.
And this constant yearning can lead to dissatisfaction even when things are objectively going well.
Yeah. Think about it.
Yeah.
Have you ever achieved something you really wanted,
Oh, yeah.
but then you immediately start thinking about the next goal?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, that's the hunger of the imagination at work.
It's like we're always striving for something just beyond our reach.
And then there's this other idea from Johnson,
Okay.
the vacuity of life.
Okay, what's that?
Well, it speaks to that feeling of emptiness we can experience, even when we're surrounded by material comforts and achievements.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we try to fill that void with distractions,
Sure.
with constant activity.
Yeah, keeping busy.
But it's this deeper longing
Right.
that we often struggle to address.
And that deeper longing can lead to adversity because we're never quite content.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder, though,
What's that?
if we're hardwired for this kind of dissatisfaction.
How can we possibly find contentment and peace?
Well, that's where Hamilton's insights come in.
Okay.
He suggests that accepting the inevitability of adversity is the first step toward dealing with it constructively.
So it's not about giving up or resigning ourselves to a life of misery.
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's about acknowledging the reality of the human condition
Okay.
and finding ways to navigate those challenges
Right.
with wisdom and resilience.
Okay, so it's about shifting our mindset
Yeah,
from one of avoidance to one of acceptance and growth.
exactly.
I'm starting to see where he's going with this.
Good.
But how do we actually put that into practice?
Hamilton dives into specific areas where adversity tends to show up,
Okay.
starting with the family.
the family.
We have this idealized image of family as a safe haven,
Right.
a place of unconditional love and support.
Right.
But reality often paints a different picture,
Oh, absolutely.
doesn't it?
Family can be a source of incredible joy and connection. But it can also be where we experience some of our deepest hurts and most challenging conflicts.
Yeah, I think most of us can relate to that in some way.
For sure.
So Hamilton uses the French philosopher Alain
Okay.
to illustrate the two extremes of dysfunctional family dynamics.
Okay. Interesting.
On one hand, you have families where any form of disagreement is completely shut down,
Really?
creating what Alain calls a dreary peace.
A dreary piece.
Yeah, it's like everyone's walking on eggshells.
Oh, wow.
afraid to rock the boat or express their true feelings.
Yeah, that sounds suffocating.
Yeah, it is.
So what's the other extreme?
Well, on the other hand,
Okay.
you have families where it's all about individual wants and needs.
Okay.
A constant battle of wills with no regard for compromise or understanding.
Yeah.
So, nobody's really listening to each other.
Right. Everyone's just trying to get their own way.
Exactly. And Elaine argues that neither of these extremes is conducive to healthy relationships.
Of course not.
It's about finding that balance between acknowledging individual needs and fostering a sense of connection and shared responsibility.
So how do we navigate that complexity?
That's the question.
How do we find that sweet spot
Right.
where we can be ourselves and still maintain healthy relationships within our families?
Well, Hamilton offers a nuanced perspective,
Okay, good.
suggesting that we first need to recognize the inherent challenges of family dynamic.
I see.
He uses this anecdote from Proust's In Search of Lost Time
Oh, proud.
about a young boy named Marcel who desperately wants a goodnight kiss from his mother.
Oh, yeah, I remember that scene.
You do.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So the mother is busy entertaining guests,
Right.
and Marcel throws a tantrum
Yeah, he's really upset.
until she finally gives in and comes to kiss him goodnight.
Yeah.
But it's not the happy ending he expected.
Right, and why is that?
Well, because he realizes that he's essentially forced his mother to act against her own wishes.
Oh, wow.
And that realization is just devastating.
Yeah.
He comes to understand that his mother is a separate person with her own needs and desires.
Yeah, she's not just an extension of him.
Right.
She's her own person.
Exactly. And that her love for him doesn't erase her individuality.
Exactly.
It's such a powerful example of how even the most loving relationships involve a degree of separation,
Yeah.
of understanding that we can't always get what we want, even from those closest to us.
That's a tough lesson to learn.
It is, but it's an important one.
And this ties into Melanie Klein's concept of ambivalence in child development.
Ambivalence, okay.
She suggests that children can actually feel hostility toward the very source of their love and care,
Really?
their parents.
Wow, that sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah, it does on the surface.
Why would a child feel anger towards someone they love and depend on?
Well, it's about the child's struggle for independence,
Okay.
the realization that they're not completely in control of the relationship.
Ah, I see.
They love their parents,
Yeah.
but they also resent their dependence on them.
Wow, so it's a really complex mix of emotions
Yeah, it is.
that can be difficult to process,
Absolutely.
even as adults.
Yeah, and it can definitely lead to some adversity within the family.
That makes so much sense. It's like that push and pull we all experience in relationships, wanting closeness, but also needing space to be our own person.
Exactly.
And this kind of reminds me of another concept,
What's that?
Freud's idea of the family romance.
Oh, yeah.
He suggests that children initially see their parents as perfect,
Mm-hmm.
almost godlike figures.
Right.
But as they grow older, they inevitably realize that their parents are flawed human beings just like everyone else.
Take a fall from grace.
Exactly.
Right.
And that realization can be really disillusioning,
It can be.
especially when we've put our parents on a pedestal.
Yeah, and that sense of disappointment, even betrayal,
Right.
can lead to conflict and resentment.
Especially if those parental flaws have caused us pain or hardship.
Exactly.
Speaking of complicated family dynamics, Hamilton uses the example of Franz Kafka
Oh,
and
Kafka.
his relationship with his father, which is famously fraught with tension and misunderstanding.
Right. Kafka, in his letter to my father,
Okay.
describes feeling inwardly wounded by his father's domineering and critical nature.
Wow.
It's a really raw and honest portrayal of the pain and frustration that can arise when we feel unseen and unappreciated.
By those we crave love and approval from.
Exactly.
I find it interesting that Kafka tries to absolve both himself and his father of guilt,
Yeah.
suggesting that their clash was almost inevitable given their vastly different personalities.
Yeah, it's like he recognizes that some conflicts are not about blame,
Right?
but about the fundamental incompatibility of certain personality types.
It's like oil and water.
Right, and Hamilton uses Primo Levi's analogy of human beings as chemical elements to further illuminate this idea.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So it's like you wouldn't blame potassium for reacting violently with water.
Right.
It's simply in its nature to do so.
Exactly.
Similarly, some people, like certain chemical elements, just clash.
Yeah, it's not about assigning fault,
Right.
but about understanding those inherent differences.
I like that a lot.
So how do we navigate those relationships where conflict seems inevitable?
That's a great question.
What can we learn from these examples of complex family dynamics?
Well, Hamilton offers some practical guidance.
Okay, good.
He stresses the importance of acceptance, acknowledging that we can't change other people no matter how much we might want to.
That's a tough one.
It is, but it's so true.
It is.
It's easy to get caught up in trying to fix people or change their behavior.
Right. We think we can mold them into who we want them to be.
Exactly. But ultimately, the only person we have control over is ourselves.
That's right. And Hamilton also talks about the importance of setting boundaries in those difficult relationships.
Boundaries, yeah.
It's about protecting ourselves from further hurt
Right,
while still maintaining a level of connection,
if that's possible.
if that's possible and healthy.
So it's not about cutting people off entirely.
No, not necessarily. It's more about creating a safe space for ourselves within those relationships.
Right.
Even if that means limiting contact or setting clear expectations about acceptable behavior.
Okay, so it's about protecting our own well-being while still trying to maintain some semblance of a relationship.
Exactly.
That's really helpful advice.
And another strategy Hamilton highlights is the power of writing as a therapeutic tool.
Writing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
By externalizing those complex feelings,
Right.
by putting them down on paper,
Okay.
we can gain a different perspective and potentially find some peace and resolution.
It's like taking those swirling thoughts and emotions and giving them a concrete form.
Exactly.
It can be incredibly cathartic
It can.
and insightful.
Yeah, you can look back at what you wrote and see things more clearly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Hamilton also uses a quote from Peter Weiss's Leave-Taking
Okay.
to illustrate the pain of miscommunication in families.
Miscommunication.
Yeah, where even the best intentions can get lost in translation.
Oh, yeah. That happens all the time in families.
It does.
We may love each other deeply, but we don't always speak the same language.
Right, both literally and figuratively.
Oh, I can relate to that.
Can you?
This makes me think about my own family and how we often struggle to express our feelings in a way that truly resonates with each other.
It's a common challenge.
Sometimes it feels like we're speaking different languages,
Yeah.
even though we're using the same words.
It can be frustrating,
It can.
but it's important to keep trying to communicate,
I agree.
to find ways to bridge those gaps in understanding.
Absolutely. And maybe that's a good place to pause for now.
Yeah, I think so.
We've covered a lot of ground when it comes to adversity in the family.
We have.
And I think it's important for our listeners to take some time to reflect on their own experiences.
Yeah, think about how these ideas resonate with your own family dynamics.
Exactly. What challenges have you faced? And what strategies have you found helpful in navigating those difficult relationships?
And we'll pick up next time with another area where adversity tends to show up.
Oh, yeah.
Love.
Love. Oh, that's a big one.
It is, but that's for next time.
Okay, sounds good.
So we often talk about love conquering all,
Yeah.
but if we're honest, love itself can be a source of incredible adversity,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
especially romantic love.
Mhm.
You know, it's often portrayed as this blissful, all-consuming experience.
Like the fairy tales.
Yeah, exactly.
But as we all know, it can be just as messy and complicated as any other human relationship.
Absolutely, more so maybe.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced those intense highs and lows
Yeah.
that come with romantic love.
For sure. It's like we're willingly stepping onto a roller coaster,
Totally.
knowing full well that there will be exhilarating climbs and heart-stopping drops along the way.
That's a great analogy.
And Hamilton points out that this idea of romantic love as a kind of madness or intoxication isn't new. Yeah. Philosophers like Socrates and Plato, way back in ancient Greece,
Wow.
recognized that falling in love can cloud our judgment
Sure.
and make us act in ways we wouldn't normally.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's like we temporarily lose ourselves in the intensity of the emotion.
Right.
And sometimes that can lead us down some pretty interesting,
Yeah.
not always pleasant paths.
Oh, definitely been there.
Hamilton suggests that this willingness to surrender to that madness might actually be part of its appeal.
Oh, interesting.
You know, in a world that's often predictable and mundane,
Yeah.
romantic love offers a sense of escape,
Right.
adventure, even if it comes with a certain amount of risk.
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. Romantic love can be a way of rebelling
Yeah.
against the structures and expectations of everyday life,
Totally.
a way of feeling truly alive.
Precisely. It allows us to step outside of ourselves to experience a different reality,
Right.
even if that reality is temporary and sometimes illusory.
So it's like a temporary escape from the mundane.
Exactly.
And I think Hamilton uses Stendhal, a French writer,
Mm-hmm.
to illustrate this point.
Yeah, known for his insights into the psychology of love.
Right.
And Stendhal describes this phenomenon called crystallization,
Crystallization.
where our minds essentially create a highly idealized version of the beloved.
Just like we're seeing them through rose-colored glasses.
Exactly, magnifying their positive qualities and filtering out any potential flaws.
We build them up in our minds.
Right, we create this perfect image of them.
And that can be dangerous
It can be.
because it sets us up for disappointment.
Yeah, when reality inevitably doesn't live up to our expectations.
Exactly.
Stendhal actually uses this vivid analogy of a bare twig being thrown into a salt mine.
Okay.
And when it's pulled out months later, it's covered in shimmering crystals, completely transformed.
Wow.
The original twig is unrecognizable.
That's such a beautiful image.
It is.
But also a little bit terrifying when you think about it in the context of love.
I know, right?
It suggests that we're not really seeing the person for who they are,
Right.
but rather a projection of our own desires and fantasies.
And while this crystallization can be incredibly intoxicating and
Yeah.
contribute to the excitement of new love,
For sure.
it can also lead to disappointment and disillusionment down the road
Right.
when those rose-colored glasses eventually come off.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Is it even possible to see our partner clearly when we're in the throes of love?
Stendhal suggests that simply being aware of this tendency towards idealization can help.
Yeah.
You know, it's about recognizing that our initial perception of the beloved might not be entirely accurate,
Right.
and to allow space for a more realistic understanding of who they are, flaws and all.
So it's not about trying to suppress those intense feelings of love and attraction.
Oh, not at all. It's
No?
more about maintaining a degree of objectivity,
Right.
of keeping one foot firmly planted in reality.
That makes sense.
And one way to do that is to observe how our partner interacts with others.
Oh, yeah.
You know, to see them outside the bubble of our own romantic focus.
Like how they treat the waiter.
Exactly. It's about getting a more well-rounded perspective
Right.
beyond the crystallization that can happen in those early stages of a relationship.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
It's like getting a second opinion,
Mm-hmm.
not from a friend or family member,
Right.
but from the way our partner interacts with the world around them.
Right. It can help us see them more clearly, to appreciate their strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And to ultimately make more informed decisions about the future of the relationship.
Okay. That's really helpful.
Now, of course, things get even more complicated when those intense feelings of love are not reciprocated.
Oh, yeah. Unrequited love.
Classic.
It's another form of adversity that can be incredibly painful
It can.
and difficult to navigate.
Absolutely. And while most people would probably agree that unrequited love is something to be avoided,
Right.
Hamilton offers a surprisingly nuanced perspective.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he draws on the insights of Simone de Beauvoir.
Okay. What does she have to say about unrequited love?
Well, she suggests that while certainly painful,
Right.
unrequited love allows us to experience the full spectrum of human emotion.
The full spectrum.
Yeah, it forces us to confront our vulnerability, our longing for connection, and our capacity for both immense joy and deep sorrow.
I see what you mean. It's about embracing those difficult emotions,
Exactly.
not as something to be ashamed of or
Yeah.
to try to suppress.
but as valuable experiences
Yeah.
that contribute to our overall understanding of ourselves
Okay.
and the human condition.
That's a powerful perspective.
And she goes even further,
Yeah.
suggesting that there's a certain value in experiencing the lows, the heartbreak.
Really?
Yeah, because it ultimately deepens our capacity for empathy and compassion.
So even though it's painful,
Yeah,
it can actually make us more understanding and compassionate people?
that's the idea.
Interesting.
So going back to Stendhal, while he acknowledged the potential pitfalls of crystallization,
Right.
he also offered some practical advice for navigating the complexities of romantic relationships.
Okay. What kind of advice? I'm all ears.
One of his suggestions is to regularly spend time with other couples.
Other couples.
Yeah, not to compare ourselves or compete,
Okay.
but to simply observe how they interact and navigate the challenges of being in a relationship.
So it's like getting a glimpse into different relationship dynamics.
Exactly.
Different ways of communicating and resolving conflicts.
Precisely. It can help us gain a broader perspective
Right.
to see our own relationship more objectively
Okay.
and to potentially learn from the successes and failures of others.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's not about trying to copy other couples or judge their choices,
No.
but about expanding our understanding of what's possible
Yeah.
and what pitfalls to avoid in our own relationship.
Right. Just getting some different perspectives.
Another key piece of advice from both Stendhal and Elaine is to cultivate a sense of humility and self-awareness.
Particularly the ability to laugh at ourselves.
Right, not take ourselves too seriously.
Exactly. That's so important in any relationship,
Yeah.
but especially in romantic relationships where emotions can run high.
For sure.
Being able to step back and see the humor in a situation
Yeah,
can often diffuse tension and prevent unnecessary conflict.
absolutely. And it also allows us to acknowledge our own imperfections, our own quirks and foibles,
Right.
which can make us more forgiving of our partner's shortcomings.
Having to say nobody's perfect.
And this reminds me of that fable Schopenhauer used
Oh, yeah.
to illustrate the inherent challenges of intimacy, the one about the porcupines.
Oh, yeah, the porcupine dilemma.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant analogy.
It is?
He describes a group of porcupines huddling together for warmth on a cold day,
Oh.
but they keep pricking each other with their spines. They move apart to avoid the pain, but then they get cold.
It's a classic dilemma.
It is, and it perfectly captures that delicate balance. You know, we have to strike in relationships, the need for closeness,
Right.
but also the potential for hurt.
Too close, and we risk pain.
Right.
Too distant, and we lose that warmth and connection.
Exactly. It's a constant negotiation.
Yeah.
Finding that sweet spot
Right.
where we can both be ourselves and be together without causing unnecessary suffering.
And of course, no discussion of adversity and love would be complete without talking about jealousy and infidelity.
Right. Two of the biggest challenges.
Probably two of the most painful experiences we can have in relationships.
You're right. And these are challenges that test even the strongest of bonds.
So how do we deal with that kind of adversity?
Well, Hamilton again emphasizes the importance of realism and perspective
Okay.
when navigating these turbulent waters.
Right, because it's easy to get caught up in the emotions.
Yeah, and lose sight of the bigger picture.
He shares a great anecdote about Antigonus,
Oh, Antigonus.
the ancient Greek king
Right.
who overheard someone criticizing him.
And instead of getting angry or defensive.
Okay. He simply said, "My ears aren't intended to hear such things."
Wow, that's a remarkable display of emotional
That's
intelligence.
self-control.
He chose to focus on what he could control,
Right.
his own reaction, rather than trying to control the opinions of others.
And I think there's a valuable lesson there for all of us,
Yeah.
especially when dealing with the complexities of love and relationships.
We can't control how others perceive us or what they say about us,
Right.
but we can choose how we respond to those external forces.
So it's about focusing on our own inner state, on cultivating a sense of peace and stability,
Exactly.
rather than getting caught up in the drama and negativity that can arise from gossip or criticism.
And Nietzsche echoes this idea in his book, Human All Too Human.
Okay.
He suggests that friendships and relationships often rely on a degree of silence.
Silence.
Yeah, on not saying everything that we think.
So it's about choosing our battles wisely,
Exactly.
recognizing that sometimes it's better to let things go unsaid, not out of weakness or avoidance, but out of a desire to preserve the relationship.
Right. It's about accepting that we don't always have to agree
Okay.
or understand each other perfectly.
Yeah.
There's a certain wisdom in allowing space for differences of opinion and to focus on the common ground that brought us together in the first place.
And when it comes to infidelity, which is a particularly challenging form of adversity in love,
Yeah.
Hamilton uses Mozart's opera Così fan tutte to illustrate the complexities of human nature.
Ooh, così fan tutte.
It's a story that revolves around temptation and the fragility of fidelity.
Yeah.
In the opera, two officers make a bet that their fiancés will remain faithful while they're away at war.
Okay.
They return disguised and surprised both women end up succumbing to temptation.
The opera's title, Così fan tutte, literally means all women do this.
Right, which on the surface might seem misogynistic.
Yeah, it does.
But Hamilton suggests that Mozart's real message is about accepting human weakness and the inherent difficulty of maintaining absolute fidelity.
Right. It's a reminder that we're all capable of making mistakes, of being tempted, and that judging those lapses harshly doesn't actually serve anyone.
It's about finding compassion and understanding,
Exactly.
even when it's difficult.
So instead of viewing infidelity as an unforgivable betrayal,
Right?
Hamilton invites us to consider the complexities of love and recognize that even the strongest relationships can be tested.
Yeah.
It's about acknowledging that we're all human,
Right.
prone to errors and judgment and susceptible to temptation.
So rather than focusing on blame and punishment, it's about having those difficult conversations,
Yeah.
about trying to understand what led to the infidelity, and then deciding as a couple how to move forward.
Right.
Whether that's through forgiveness, separation, or some other path.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that there are no easy answers or one-size-fits-all solutions.
Right. Every situation is unique.
When it comes to navigating the complexities of love and relationships.
It's about open communication, empathy,
Yeah.
and a willingness to confront those difficult truths together.
Absolutely. And that's the key takeaway.
It sounds like we've just scratched the surface when it comes to the complexities of romantic love.
Oh, yeah, we have.
But I think it's important for our listeners to take some time to reflect on their own experiences.
I agree.
How have they experienced the joys and the potential for adversity in their own relationships?
Yeah. Think about those times when you felt deeply in love and those times when your heart was broken.
Right.
What lessons did you learn from those experiences?
What strategies did you find helpful in navigating those challenges?
Yeah, and we'll continue our exploration with another unavoidable aspect of the human experience.
Okay, what's that?
Illness.
So we've talked about family dynamics,
Right.
the ups and downs of love. But now let's turn to another experience that's common to all of us,
Yeah.
and often a major source of adversity.
Illness?
Illness, exactly.
That's a good one.
No matter how much we prioritize our health. Illness is something we all face at some point.
Yeah, it's a reminder of our human vulnerability.
For sure.
And it can be incredibly challenging to navigate,
Absolutely.
both physically and emotionally.
And it's interesting how even with all the advancements in modern medicine, we still haven't conquered illness.
Yeah, we haven't found the cure-all.
There's always that element of uncertainty,
Right.
of not knowing how our bodies will respond to treatment
Yeah.
or how long we'll have to endure suffering.
That's where Hamilton brings in the wisdom of Montaigne, the 16th century philosopher
Right.
who had a remarkably insightful perspective on illness.
And he had a lot of experience with it himself.
He did, especially through his own experience with kidney stones.
Kidney stones.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Even with modern pain management,
Right.
they're known to be excruciating.
Montaigne didn't have that luxury.
No, he didn't.
So he had to face that pain head on.
He did.
And yet he managed to find a certain wisdom in that experience.
It's pretty amazing, actually.
What's fascinating about Montaigne is that he didn't try to deny or fight against his illness.
Right. He saw it as an inevitable part of life,
Okay.
something to be accepted and learned from,
I love that.
rather than something to be feared or resented.
It's about shifting our perspective
Exactly.
from seeing illness as this enemy to be conquered
Yeah.
to recognizing it as a natural part of the human experience.
Right.
Something that can actually teach us valuable lessons about ourselves and the world.
And in his final essay, Montaigne offers some incredibly practical advice on how to deal with illness.
Okay. What does he say?
Well, he suggests that we avoid excessive complaining,
Okay.
recognizing that illness is a shared human experience,
Right.
not a personal burden.
It's easy to forget that when we're in the midst of our own suffering.
It is, but it's important to remember that everyone is dealing with something,
Right.
whether it's physical, emotional, or mental.
And Montaigne also talks about the importance of finding strength in accepting weakness.
That sounds paradoxical,
It-
but I think there's a deep truth there.
Explain that a little bit.
It's about letting go of that need to control everything,
Okay.
to be perfect,
Right.
and surrendering to the reality of our human limitations.
So it's about recognizing that we're not superhuman,
Right.
that we can't always power through or push our limits without consequences.
And that acceptance can actually be incredibly empowering
Okay. How so?
because it allows us to focus our energy on those things we can control,
Like what?
like our attitude, our choices,
Okay.
and the way we respond to our circumstances.
So instead of wasting energy on fighting against the inevitable,
Mm-hmm.
we can channel that energy into things that are actually within our control.
Exactly.
I like that.
Montaigne also stresses the importance of gratitude.
Gratitude.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of focusing on what we still have.
Right.
Rather than dwelling on what we've lost due to illness.
It's a way of shifting our attention to the positive, even in the midst of suffering.
And he even goes so far as to say, you are not dying because you are ill, you are dying because you are alive.
Wow.
It's a stark reminder that death is always present, regardless of illness,
Right.
and that life itself is a process of dying.
That's a powerful perspective shift.
It is.
It's about accepting the impermanence of life,
Hmm.
of recognizing that our time here is precious and finite.
And that awareness can actually motivate us to live more fully.
To appreciate those simple joys
Exactly.
that we often take for granted.
Now, while Montaigne had this incredible ability to find perspective and even peace in his illness,
Right.
Hamilton acknowledges that not everyone has that same level of stoicism.
Of course not.
He even shares a personal anecdote about how his own anxiety about being sick actually prolonged his suffering.
Oh, I can relate to that.
Yeah. We all know that stress and worry can weaken our immune systems and
Yeah.
make us more susceptible to illness.
Absolutely.
And when we're sick, that fear and anxiety can create a vicious cycle,
Yeah.
making it even harder to heal.
Sometimes our minds can be our own worst enemies,
It can.
amplifying our pain and delaying our recovery.
And this reminds me of another tendency Hamilton points out:
What's that?
the urge to blame others when we're ill,
Oh, yeah.
even if we know rationally that they're not responsible.
Oh, I've definitely been guilty of that.
Have you?
Yeah. It's like we need to find a target for our frustration and anger,
Right.
even if it's misdirected.
Hamilton uses a quote from Tommaso di Lampedusa's novel The Leopard to illustrate this.
Okay.
He says, "Blaming others is the most powerful pleasure that the human creature is able to enjoy."
Wow. That's not very flattering.
No, it's not.
But it's certainly recognizable.
It is.
It speaks to our need to make sense of our suffering,
Yeah.
to find a cause, even if it's an illusion.
And in contrast to this tendency to blame,
Okay.
Hamilton brings in Samuel Johnson.
Oh, Johnson always has something interesting to say.
He does.
What's his take?
Well, he had some pretty strong opinions about complaining and seeking pity when you're sick. He basically told a friend to stop dwelling on his mental illness,
Okay.
to stop seeking sympathy, and instead focus on cultivating gladness and connecting with friends.
So it's like tough love,
Kinda.
but I can see the wisdom in it.
Me too.
It's about taking back our power, about choosing how we respond to our circumstances,
Right.
rather than letting our illness dictate our thoughts and emotions.
Exactly. And speaking of empowering responses to illness,
Okay.
Hamilton shares this incredible story about Norman Cousins.
Norman Cousins,
Yeah.
who literally laughed his way back to health.
He did.
I've heard about this.
Have you?
Didn't he check himself out of the hospital
He did.
and basically prescribe himself a steady diet of comedy films?
Yeah, he rented a hotel room, surrounded himself with Marx Brothers movies and other funny things, and incredibly, his condition started to improve.
No way.
Yes.
That's amazing.
He attributed his recovery, at least in part, to the healing power of laughter. Yeah.
It speaks to the profound connection between our minds and bodies,
It does.
and the power of positive emotions to influence our well-being,
Right.
even in the face of serious illness.
It's a reminder that even when things are tough, finding moments of joy, connection, and laughter can be incredibly powerful medicine.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us to the end of our exploration of adversity.
It does.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, from family and love to illness and death.
It's been a challenging, but ultimately, I think, very hopeful conversation.
I agree.
Because what we've learned from Christopher Hamilton's book is that adversity is not something to be feared or avoided.
Right.
It's an inevitable part of life.
It is.
And it's through those challenges that we grow and learn and become more resilient.
We come to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
So to our listeners out there, I hope this deep dive has given you some new insights and tools for dealing with adversity in your own lives.
And remember, you're
Yeah.
not alone in this.
We're all in this together.
Facing the ups and downs,
The joys and the sorrows
the triumphs and the heartbreaks.
that come with being human.
Thanks for joining us.